This is TradeFlow News, bringing you relevant news and insights from around the world. TradeFlow News, enabling trade for SMEs and economies worldwide.
These are some of the key topics that we will be looking into in today's program.
First, let's take a look at the overnight headlines which are impacting the commodity markets.
Oil prices slipped on Tuesday as concerns eased about the fallout from Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's overthrow, but the market found support in China's vow to ramp up policy stimulus, which could boost the top global crude buyers' demand. Brent crude futures fell 26 cents, or about 0.4%, to $71.88 per barrel. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures were down 30 cents, also 0.4% lower, at $68.07 at 07:07 GMT. Both benchmarks climbed more than 1% on Monday. The tensions in the Middle East seem contained, which led market participants to price for potentially low risks of a wider regional spillover leading to significant oil supply disruption, said IG market strategist Yip Junrong.
China's crude oil imports jumped in November from a year earlier for the first annual growth in 7 months, data showed on Tuesday, driven by lower prices of Middle East supplies and additions to the national stockpile. The world's top crude oil buyer took in 48.52 million metric tons last month, data from the General Administration of Customs showed, up 14.3% from 42.45 million tons a year earlier and equivalent to about 11.81 million barrels per day. Daily average imports were the highest since August 2023 and up from a low base in November 2023 of 10.33 million barrels of oil per day.
Moving on to the top news in the energy sector.
China's coal imports rose 26% year-on-year in November, taking total arrivals for the year to a record high, customs data showed on Tuesday, as imported supply was cheaper than domestic coal. Coal imports totaled 54.98 million metric tons last month, up from 46.25 million tons in October, according to the data from the General Administration of Customs. November imports was the highest on record for the month. From January to November, imports rose 14.8% to 490.03 million metric tons. That has already exceeded the total imports seen in 2023, setting a fresh annual record.
Fuel makers in California could face more headwinds next year as new legislation takes effect and refining margins remain weak, the U.S. Energy Information Administration, EIA, said on Monday. California, the most populous U.S. state, consistently faces some of the nation's highest average gasoline prices, leading to an often tense relationship between the state and oil companies. The state is geographically isolated from the Gulf Coast and Midwest refining centers, and must produce all its own motor fuels or import them from Asia. However, imported fuels are likely to become a more important source of supply for California as refineries in the state struggle with profitability, the EIA said in an analysis on Monday. Next, we have the top news in metal markets. China's iron ore imports in November fell 1.91% from October, customs data showed on Tuesday, as shipments slowed ahead of the slow season for steel demand when colder weather disrupts construction work in the country's north. The world's largest iron ore consumer imported 101.86 million metric tons of the steelmaking ingredient last month, data from the country's General Administration of Customs showed. This was down from 103.84 million tons in October and lower than the 102.74 million tons in November 2023. The trend is in line with our expectations as pressure on miners to lift shipments to achieve annual targets has eased after a wave of high shipments earlier this year, said Pei Hao, an analyst at international brokerage Freight Investor Services.
Gold prices gained on Tuesday, helped by escalating geopolitical tensions in the Middle East and expectations of a U.S. rate cut this month, with key U.S. inflation data later this week grabbing investors' attention. Spot gold was up 0.2% to $2,665.04 per ounce, as of 0912 GMT. Bullion hit a 2-week high in the previous session. U.S. gold futures rose 0.1% to $2,687.40. Friday's jobs report has boosted bets around a December Fed rate. Geopolitical tensions in the Middle East and reports of China's central bank resuming gold purchases after a 6-month break is supporting gold prices, said FXTM senior research analyst Lukman Otunuga.
We will now look at the top news in the agricultural sector.
Malaysia's palm oil stockpiles slipped in November for a second consecutive month, as production dropped more than expected to its lowest level for the month in 4 years, according to the country's industry regulator on Tuesday. The drop in inventories could fuel the rally in benchmark futures, which are already near their highest levels in about 2.5 years. Malaysia, the world's second-largest palm oil producer after Indonesia, is at the center of this trend. Malaysia's palm oil stocks at the end of November fell 2.6% to 1.84 million metric tons from the prior month, the Malaysian Palm Oil Board said.
That is all for today's news on commodity markets. Stay tuned to TradeFlow News as we continue to provide you with more updates. We also invite you to follow us on Twitter at TradeFlow News, which allows you to watch our program on your mobile device or desktop to receive information from there.